So what markets are you in, by the way, today?
So the vast majority of our revenue is in Australia. So we've been around in Australia since 2012, and actually it turns out that Australia is quite a good market because it's a high trust market, and it's actually dense enough in the sense that 70% of the population lives in two major cities. So you're able to just focus on those two major cities. Since then, we've launched into the UK, so we're doing a few million of GMV now in the UK, mainly in London, and more recently we've launched into Ireland, New Zealand, Singapore, and aiming to launch into the US in the second half of this semester.
Nice. And then, so do you guys, are you're headquartered in Australia? Do you have teams in the other markets, or how do you kind of think about launching in other markets too?
So all of our product design engineering teams and the head office is all based here in Sydney. So we're about 100 people here in Australia. We've also launched in some localization. So first of all, we have a team in Manila that in the Philippines that does primarily our customer service and growth marketing for us. Our SEO team and our customer support teams are in Manila. So Sydney and Manila are really the central hubs. In terms of like localizing for each of those markets, so we've actually done some experiments here. So we've actually experimented with putting a lot of resource in the local team and really putting a lot into marketing to build up that initial liquidity. It turns out for us that there's counterbalancing forces there. It's really great to be localized because you can understand the local market, particularly for things like PR and supply side outreach. It's powerful to be local. But there is one real challenge in it, which is that in the early stages, you're still trying to figure out how the product actually works in those countries, and there are lots of tweaks that you just don't really anticipate upfront. So, we obviously ticked off standard things like making sure that the payment system could work in that country and that we had the right insurances and things like that. But there are a whole bunch of nuances which we didn't predict. For example, when we launched into the UK, what we realized there is that everyone talks in London about boroughs. And so all of their searches are all done in boroughs. So they'll say like, oh, I need a plumber in Hammersmith. Well, it turns out that Hammersmith, the borough, is actually not a Google defined area. Like Google actually defines things, in the logical computer generated way, which is all in terms of towns, but no one ever searches for towns. And so we had to go in and build all of this tooling to allow us to classify areas based on boroughs, which all had to be customized. And so we realized that having like these local teams, you had to stage that. You have to get your product and engineering right first before you go and invest a lot into localization. And so what we've actually done now is we've built our international teams in Sydney. So a team that is focused on making the UK localization work, but that sits closely with the product and engineering teams here in Sydney. And of course, time zones make it virtually impossible to do that kind of cross-country collaboration well.